So thank you everyone for joining this webinar on maximising seasonal celebrations, retail trends and prize draw strategies to drive engagement. So we all know that sort of the festive season's coming up, and I know everyone has started sort of planning for their 2025 and started to think about sort of how they can maximise sort of seasonal celebrations coming up. So with me today we have David Roth. So he's going to sort of introduce himself now.
Hi, very nice to be with you. Thanks very much indeed. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And unfortunately, our global compliance manager, Amy, is not able to make this session today due to illness, but we're still going to sort of carry on sort of around her. So if you, and just like a few kind of house kind of things, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and then we'll be able to kind of answer them from there, and then you'll be able to we'll be able to kind of sort of see how you're engaging with the content we've got today. So feel free to kind of add in questions as we go along, and then we'll answer them towards the end. So without further ado, shall we sort of get started? David, if you want to kind of
Brilliant. Okay, well, great. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to go through today a few sort of areas that I hope will give you, first of all, a little bit of context in terms of what's been going on so far in the holiday period as we see it, and then maybe some observations about the future, what the future is going to bring from a retail perspective. There have been no shortage of shopping festivals and shopping occasions around the world over the course of the last few weeks and the last couple of months. So I'm going to start our tour of looking at what's happened around the world in those with China. And the reason I'm going to start with China is because from a retail perspective, and certainly from a digital retail perspective, China is way advanced of any other country in the world, and to an extent gives us a little glimpse into the future of what may well happen in the UK and Europe and also in the US. And we've seen many of the technological e-commerce, social commerce innovations that have first taken place in China and then have rapidly sort of taken hold across other markets of the world. And I don't see that changing in the short term. So it's, I think, important to take a look at what's just happened in China over the 11/11 shopping festival. And I think it's even more important this year because for all sorts of reasons, there's been significantly less coverage of the 11/11 shopping festival in China this year than there has been in previous years. And there are all sorts of reasons for that. There's a lot going on in the world agenda at the moment. There's a lot of naysayers in terms of the economic outlook for China. And I think we could be forgiven in terms of what we've just seen over the course of the last month in China at 11/11 for thinking that actually it's not as dynamic as it has been from a consumer proposition perspective. So I want to cover that because that's very, very far from reality. And I must say I've been very impressed by the level of innovation and the ability of retailers in China to really create true shopping festival experiences, the sort of things that actually we still don't do particularly well in the UK, and we don't do in the US either, in terms of what we see for Black Friday and Cyber Monday and the sales period we're currently in. That's sort of very peculiar this year because the sales period from Cyber Monday and Black Friday is considerably shorter because just the way in which the timings worked in terms of shopping days left And indeed, we have one less weekend over this period as well. So that creates a very different sort of framework and a laydown in terms of the communication, B, the consumer journey, and C, when we'll see some of the hard discounting happen, depending on what the sales are like. So the retail industry, I'm convinced. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in China. I lived in China, so I know that market very well, and retailed in China. And I am as convinced now as I was then that the retail industry here in the UK can learn a lot of valuable lessons from the approaches that are taken in China to engage with consumers and especially generate growth in the whole sort of digital area. So let's take a look at the scale of 11.11 this year. So 11.11 performed significantly better than was expected, not just by European analysts, by Chinese analysts as well, with sales up 27% year on year. That's not bad from an economy that's, I say, only growing at 5%. I think we'd all be very pleased here if we were growing by 5%. That's sort of reached in terms of sales to give it a dollar value of $151 billion over the shopping festival period. Now, if and the majority of those sales being done digitally. Now, if that 151 billion was, I suppose, an e-commerce market, it would make, that's the totality of the e-commerce market, it would make just that 11.11 period in China the third largest e-commerce market in the world. So you can see the scale of the sales and opportunity for 11.11. Now, major platforms like JD.com and Tmall saw sales growth that was quite significant. So JD were up by about 20% and Tmall up by 47%. So considerable improvement over last year, which in itself was a considerable improvement over the year before. But of course, doing those comparisons is misleading in a sense, because the festival period itself, which many years ago, when it was first created by Jack Ma, was only a day, and now that sales period, mainly because of the success that 11.11 has had across China, just the pure logistics of it all. I mean, if you just think of doing 151 billion sales in a day, the logistics of that is frightening. So over the course of the last 6 to 7 years, it's expanded, and now rather being one day, it's almost a month, so pretty much sort of 24 to 29 days, depending on which of the operators. So it is slightly misleading when one talks about a 27% uplift only on the basis that that's over a longer period of time. But still, the sales over, in a sense, the 11.11 period are still are immensely impressive. I think one of the really interesting things about China that we should be taking more lessons from here and across Europe and America is the way in which the shopping festivals in China really do engage consumers. I mean, they are interesting, they're fun, they're phenomenally engaging, and the engagement levels this year were up 20% compared to 2021. So it's not same as, and I think that's probably the biggest issue that we probably face here in the UK and in Europe and America, that there's a lot of repetition of what was done last year and the year before. And if we all were asked to predict the types of sales activity, the deals that were going to happen, etc., for next year's Black Friday in the UK, I think we'd probably almost get it 100% right. But China has a constant sea of innovations that continue to highly engage consumers. Now, the key innovations were in the realms of social commerce and also a lot of user experience improvements, which again really generated direct sales. A lot more live streaming commerce on platforms such as Douyin. Douyin is, I was going to say China's equivalent to TikTok, but it is TikTok. So it's Douyin in China. Same platform was called TikTok outside of China. Douyin saw an increase of 55%, reaching, and these numbers are astronomical, but reaching $46 billion in sales. You've got to remember that it wasn't that long ago that Douyin actually started doing physical commerce within their store, and it was only last year, from a TikTok perspective, that TikTok sales were being enabled through their platform. Now, I think one of the things that we should keep an eye on, and I think is interesting to look at for adoption in other markets, is the huge growth in loyalty programs that we've seen in China. All the usual suspects have them. Alibaba's 8 VIP club, I think we'd all be delighted if we had 40 million members, or 40 million spending members, which is what they have. And we can start to see that even in those heavy promotional and new product launch periods like 11/11, your loyal customers, your loyal members significantly outperform the rest of your users. And this year, those 40 million high spending Alibaba 8 VIP club members contributed to half of the top brand sales, and that's something that sort of we ignore at our peril. Now, there are always a lot of fun sort of facts about how many parcels get sent out per second as a result of all that expenditure. But one that really did catch my eye this year, because I think it has profound impact for the way in which speed e-commerce is created, which is the micro delivery times that JD.com are now enabled to create and excuse the pun, physically deliver. Now, where it wasn't that long ago where getting a parcel through e-commerce took 3 days, and you were very glad it actually arrived. And then Amazon Prime came on the scene and radically changed the game, and next day delivery became sort of the norm. And same day delivery now for some of the items, depending on the locality that you live in, Amazon as well. But JD have perfected instant delivery, and for a number of their areas, they're now offering a 9-minute delivery. That was rolled out for 11/11. So you can imagine just the logistical infrastructure to enable you to actually be able to pull that off in such a busy trading time. But you can start to see how important speed of delivery and certainty of delivery is. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the drivers of that growth. There's been a renewed government stimulus package in China to try and boost the economy, particularly in home appliances, and that's sort of been a helper and the driver of some of that growth. Improvements in fulfillment and clearly the use of AI have also very much enabled brands to deliver both sort of scale on the one hand and efficiency on the other. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how prominent AI has been this year, probably for the first time, in the discovery and sales process, and how important it's also going to be going forward as well. So let's take a look at some of the trends in consumer behavior. I mean, clearly, the economic climate in China, as it is elsewhere, has severely impacted consumer spending. But of course, within that impact on consumer spending, I mean, in a sense, impact of consumer spending downwards as opposed to consumer spending upwards, or consumers thinking twice before they spend with their more limited disposable income. But there are, of course, big differentiations in which categories are doing well, which categories aren't doing well. So a big category of growth was this year was very much health and beauty in China, and a lot of that is still foreign brands. So still big opportunities in the health and beauty sector of the marketplace as well. Now, I talked very briefly about AI just before. We're going to talk about it again now, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it a little bit later on as well. Because whereas AI sort of took everybody's imagination maybe 18 months ago with ChatGPT and the things you could ask it for and sort of get instant answers for, which in some respects is pretty magical. The last 12 months or so, a lot of focus has been put on that type of technology and what ability it does have in both the search process, the consumer discovery process, and the buying process. And I think it's fair to say that AI has now become of age. 23% of Gen Zers are users of AI for everyday shopping. And in terms of search, we're seeing many more searches started on AI technology or answered through AI technology. So again, if you're not playing in this space, understanding what is and what does work for you, what doesn't work for you, you really should be, because it's already sales significant and is only going to get more so over the course of the next few years. And we also see, I suppose, in China, the sort of the antidote to this sort of big sales day or combination of days with what we call the rise of Green Friday. And that is, I suppose, the antidote to push a lot of things through the system, create a lot of environmental impact, a lot of packaging. There's a lot of packaging with all those sales growth. How can you do that and do that in a way that is the least damaging to the environment as possible? So before we move on to other markets, let's just look at some of the consumer trends and maybe some of the market advice, because I think some of this, whilst comes out of the sales numbers that we are seeing in China, I think some of the themes of these are going to be equally relevant and important in other markets around the world. I think the first thing in China we're seeing is with younger consumers, they're a big backlash to the what was known as the 996 work culture, which is you start at 9, you finish at 9, you do that 6 days a week. There's much more seeking for a balanced sort of work-life culture, especially in the post-COVID era, where do you really need to go to the office every day, and more sort of balanced and hybrid working. So I think, again, a trend in China, but we're going to see that around the world. And that has all sorts of opportunities for different types of marketing, different types of product sales. I mean, the outdoor market in China is absolutely booming as more and more people are not working as hard and want to take advantage of the great outdoors and outdoors. And there's lots of other ways of looking at that as well. A shift away from more conspicuous consumption towards sort of more experiential and wellness focused purchases. And I think there's a great opportunity in the UK to also move more towards more experiences than necessarily things. Categories like health, beauty, sports, pets, seeing huge growth as sort of consumers want products that align with their identities and their life cycles and lifestyles. the requirement, I think, for brands to have to understand evolving consumer preferences and behaviors. Again, that's what I say, these things are equally applicable to us outside of China, but the speed within which this is happening in China makes it a great poster child to have a look at and see what will impact us here. So, working with partners who can help navigate that fast sort of digital ecosystem. Great successes of brands like Lululemon, who've positioned themselves both as a lifestyle brand that appeals both to the fitness and to the wellness trend. And that's a great sort of repositioning that Lululemon has done in China. Both from a societal and a demographic changes, significantly impacting both consumer behavior, especially in the luxury sector. We've seen almost a 40% reduction in the luxury sector in China over the last couple of years. And given how large the China luxury sector has become to the big international luxury players, that is having a big impact for them right across the world. There's also, so I think a lot of all of these things have driven a change, and we will see that change in other markets around the world towards more experiential, as we say, wellness rather than just status-driven purchases. Before we move on to, I suppose, other markets, I think one of the things that we're seeing more and more of is the rapid digitization and gamification of commerce. And that really has transformed the shopping experience. It has been slower than I originally thought outside of China, but this year, especially with TikTok in America and the work they did with opinion formers then on social commerce sales within TikTok, I think we're beginning to see the acceleration really start to take off. And this has required brands really to start to rethink their marketing and their engagement strategies, focusing more on that sort of personalized, engaging experience, relating sort of emotional content with consumers as well. So let us turn our attention for the next while. We've got to sort of Black Friday and Cyber Monday, and I suppose the whole notion of value. What is value? Because of course, I suppose the proposition, the overriding proposition, the overriding psychological contract that retailers, brand owners, manufacturers have with their consumers over the Black Friday and Cyber Monday period is the fact that they will offer their consumers better, greater value, and we'll try to unpack what those elements of value are. So Black Friday, Cyber Monday, here I'm really talking about sort of the US and what we see in some of the European and UK markets. Delivered strong sales across most markets. I say strong sales, that's in the context of a relatively weak economies and a relatively weak GDP growth. So web traffic was up 3% on Thanksgiving Day and 2.3% on Black Friday in the States year over year. Gifting intent also increased significantly. So more people were making purchases for other people than themselves. So that increased by 13% year after year. If you look at the actual retail sales themselves, retail sales were up about 3.4 to 4%, depending on which sources, be it sort of MasterCard or other sources. So again, that's pretty good going, given where the predictions were. But e-commerce sales grew by around 15%. So e-commerce still is outperforming overall retail. But I think the thing to me that gave me the biggest smile was that in-store sales were up by almost 1% compared to Black Friday last year. And we are seeing this around the world more and more now, that people are rediscovering physical retail. That's not to say they're falling out of love with digital retail, but it's a combination of the two. And the physical is proving very attractive, especially to younger shoppers. So I think that should give us some good confidence. And let's not forget, because obviously clearly a lot of talk is about what happens in the digital world, but by far the greatest percentage and the greatest revenue of consumer expenditure in retail still comes from physical, and will come from physical for the foreseeable future. I think probably one of the biggest headline, I'm not necessarily saying surprises, but things that you should look at, nod at, and then do something significantly about, which was 23% of Gen Z consumers over this shopping period used AI regularly. Whether that was for a start of search or the way in which some of the brands and retailers were deploying AI within their websites, whether it was computer vision searches. And we also saw that brands using AI saw an almost 10% uplift in their conversion rate. So if you were maybe sitting on the fence and thinking this AI stuff is a lot of fun, but it's never going to catch on, and it's not going to have a great impact in terms of sales generation or being helpful in the shopper journey, think again. It's had a dramatic impact, and it will continue to. So if you're not experimenting in this space, I absolutely recommend that you start to do so immediately. Now, as I said, the fundamental psychological contract with consumers, retailers, brand owners over this current sales period, and especially Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is about I'm going to get better value. From a consumer perspective, it's a game between them and the retailer. So I hand over to you lots of money slightly earlier than I might have done, and you give me exceptional value as the that transactional relationship. But I'd like to give you a framework of value perceptions, because there are different types of value, and I think it's important that we understand that both from the consumer perspective, but also how you deliver value is a game of strategy, and there are 4 dimensions that we think are really important, and this is done by the data that we have at WPP at BAV, which is the longest and largest running brand study in the world, which also helps provide a lot of insight into both consumer perceptions and attitudes generally, but clearly especially at brands. Now, what we do know is that 87% of consumers view themselves as value shoppers. So when we talk about value, that's all of us looking for value, but all of us are not necessarily looking for the lowest possible price. Our concept of what value is slightly different. But in order to market efficiently and effectively, we need to be able to tap that value equation. And it's the critical factor, I suppose, in encompassing price and quality, convenience, and emotional engagement as well. So we have the BAV brand worth map framework, which sort of categorizes brands based on 4 dimensions of value. It's that typical sort of 4-box Boston matrix, but unlike the conventional positions of that Boston matrix, the best place to be is not necessarily the top right-hand corner. I think a really intriguing thing about the brand worth map framework is that where you are placed in those quadrants is less important, because it's a lot about where you choose to play in those quadrants, and each of those quadrants have strategic advantages of their own. So let me explain to you briefly those 4 quadrants. The first is the power of desire, right? So that's high worth brands perceived as in terms of their value as lower than the average on good value, and those tend to be aspirational brands that consumers see as worth paying more for because they desire to own them, and that overrides any pure value considerations. So the types of brands that are in that sort of quadrant are sort of, Apple, Chanel, a lot of the luxury fashion brands would be in that segment as well. Very, very highly desired. The fact that they are expensive is not off-putting. In fact, the fact they're expensive might actually enhance the whole notion of what desire is all about, because in that context, desire is about exclusivity. Then there's the power of brand worth, which is the combination of high worth and high value, and brands that always provide the best sort of reassurance that your money is well spent. And again, 2 great examples from the UK on that are Amazon and also Primark. Then we get to the power of emotional choice. So that sort of low worth and low value, in a sense, don't necessarily mean the brand is weak, but it sort of represents a consumer's unique and personal relationship with that type of brand. And then we have the power of the value champions. And the value champions, that sort of positioning is where consumers feel that they're being helped to stretch their money as far as they possibly can with the brand in that particular quadrant. They feel the brand is on their side, trying to help them make their disposable income go as far as they possibly can. And although, in a sense, those brands worth, in a sense, value versus worth is below average, the brands really do help consumers do their best, both for themselves and for their family. So a great example of brands in that arena would be Walmart, Asda, and Aldi. Now, the reason it's important to look at this type of strategic framework is that you can deliver to your consumer value in different ways. Yeah, you can deliver them, as the Walmart type of value being, perceived as a value champion, or you can deliver, a power of desire. If you're Apple, people will pay significantly more for your product than its true sort of value worth because of the desire of having an Apple product. The issue is it's a game of strategy, and you need to decide for your consumers on what type of occasions, in what types of markets, you need to play across those dimensions. Now, it's pretty impossible to talk about Black Friday, Cyber Monday without talking about Amazon. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive into Amazon and what's happened to Amazon over the sales period, and clearly during their own sales holiday, which is Amazon Prime. So Amazon have seen continued growth during the holiday and shopping season, sales increasing of around 20 and 25% year on year. That's not bad. I would take that in a heartbeat. But the sales period, so, again, this is why looking at China is so instructive, because what we see happening in China, we then see happen replicating elsewhere. And we see that with Amazon as well. So their sales periods, typically Amazon Prime, other things as well, are also becoming much more extended. They used to be a day. Some of them, are flash sales of a few hours. But we are seeing a much more concerted effort by Amazon to extend these activities over longer longer days, and it's being driven by the same reasons that the China 11/11 sales period is growing in terms of the number of days, because after a certain point, the logistics really do start to catch you out, and therefore to have a logistics operation that can cope with a huge volume of incremental sales on just a short period is putting real strain on the system. Now, what does that mean to us as retailers, brand owners, manufacturers, when the likes of Amazon extend, and we see with other periods of general Black Friday? I don't know if you sort of saw it on your high street, but Black Friday seemed to start about a month earlier than the day of Black Friday. It means that you have to shift to be more strategic at maintaining interest and momentum over the longer promotional period. So you sort of get the advantage of it not all being concertinaed into one short period, but you have the challenge of trying to make it interesting, exciting over a longer period of time. And that also has an impact in terms of the momentum and how long those individual shopping promotional, both the period is and the products that you use in order to get consumers into the stores and buy things. The other thing that's worth noting on Amazon is that there is the Amazon sellers sort of get bucketed into, P1 and P3 sellers. Third-party sellers on Amazon are growing at so that's P3, are growing at a much faster rate than the direct brand offerings. That's P1. And the reason for that is that they have much more flexibility in their pricing and their promotional strategies, allowing them to be significantly more agile and much more responsive to changing consumer demands than the P1 sellers. And traditional brands have also found it very challenging now to work with, I suppose, a change in mindset of Amazon. If you haven't encountered this before, if you haven't realized it, Amazon are becoming much more profit driven in terms of their model, less pure sales driven. So looking at sales driving profit as opposed to sales in their own right. And that's very much been benefited or benefiting the third party sales as well. So what products do we see increasing across Amazon? Electronics, definitely still the top selling product categories. And others like home improvements and groceries and beauty are also seeing significant growth. And beauty in particular see great sales performance as brands have very much started to adapt their product offerings and their marketing strategies for doing things in a different way in online. And I think that the beauty category really has been very fast and very good at being able to market and position to the digital consumer in a different way than they do virtually. And you can learn a lot by looking at what these people are doing. So is Prime Day something that is still really important for Amazon, and therefore, I suppose, important for sellers on Amazon and brands on Amazon? I mean, there is no doubt that Amazon Prime Day has become a critical traffic driving event for Amazon. It's helping to build momentum and engagement right, at the very start of the holiday shopping period. It sort of starts to set the tone and the muscle memory of, I'm going to, let's see what if it is selling at Amazon and how much it is for. But I think it's also really important now to remember the event is more important for Amazon itself than it is for any of the individual brands. And that's sort of not so true for Alibaba and JD.com in China, because Amazon Prime drives Amazon Prime membership, and clearly they're generating huge amounts of revenue in that, and overall platform activities, because we know that Amazon Prime members shop on Amazon significantly more than non-members, and also use a lot of the other Amazon ancillary services. So a big need, I think, for brands to adapt their strategies to be able to succeed on the various different traffic platforms that there are. How you succeed on TikTok is different to how you succeed on Amazon, and as brands, you need to understand the base level of that and then adapt accordingly, and adapt accordingly how you can engage with different platforms in a slightly different way depending on their role. So let's summarize a little bit and say that, I suppose, despite a challenging economic climate in many markets, I'm pretty optimistic on the potential for retail growth. I think what we're seeing and where we see that growth and how that growth has been stimulated by proactive marketing activities, the real importance of being amazingly agile in going forward, much more innovative, having a real deep understanding of consumers and the brands they're looking for. Really important to adapt, change on the fly, experiment, do things differently. A real need for retailers to find new ways of engaging with their consumers and driving further growth, especially in an economic period, which I think will remain challenging for the next few years. And the fundamental importance, if there's one thing to take out of this, is the transformational impact of technologies. Now, we've seen that over the course of the last 15 years. There were many people that said the internet was a fad and it will never take off, and no one's ever going to be able to sell anything other than books and CDs. I mean, CDs, what happened to those? They've disappeared themselves, let alone the fact that where you sell them. So do really look at AI. What's the role that AI is going to play in the consumer decision-making process, in the search process, in the way in which you operate, the way in which you use data, because it's going to have potential for the live shopping experiences to reshape again the retail landscapes if we haven't had enough reshaping over the course of the last 15 years. And I would say that the most important thing for me is, as both a retail operator and as a retail analyst, is I'm very optimistic, having seen this year's beginning of the holiday period. It's the beginning, so the next, as you well know, the next couple of weeks is going to be critical for all of us, or maybe the next week is going to be critical for all of us. But I'm optimistic from what I've seen and what I'm seeing around the world. But we still, as retailers, as brand owners, as marketeers, need to embrace change and innovation to drive sustainable growth. And I mean that both in its physical sense, to do it in a way that creates less impact on the environment for the years ahead. Well, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, David. That was a really sort of in-depth sort of conversation about the retail space, and you've given us a lot of things to think about and a lot of food for thought. So unfortunately, we only have time for about one question so far, but we'll sort of answer some more questions sort of on the sort of post-webinar handout. So one question would be, do you see China being a market leader for retail innovations in the coming years, or do you see a different country becoming a disruptor in this space?
I think I For the moment, I think it's still going to be China, but there's some really interesting things that are going on in Vietnam, and interesting things will be going on in Indonesia. Both markets that have very young consumers, growing middle classes, and a big increasing digital presence. I think the other thing to bear in mind is there also will be some great pan-Asian retailers. There are some currently, but more across more markets as well. So that's something to take a good look at as well.
Great, thank you very much. We'll definitely keep an eye on those. So we've just hit like the 45-minute mark. Thank you very much. So if you do have any sort of needs for promotions, that we're building on what David said about sort of working into the experimental space and maximizing on these kind of important days, then please let us know, give us a message, or down on get in touch via our website. So thank you very much, David, for all your
Pleasure,
time.
lovely to be with you.
Yes,
Have a
thank you very much. It's been
good
really
holiday period for
interesting.
everybody,
Thank
and
you, and
hope sales are good.
yeah, definitely. We're looking forward to a very productive 2025 now, with all of this great information. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you. Bye bye.